Hi everyone. So for my presentation, I'll be talking about fetal circulation. I'll specifically be talking about how blood flows through the heart before birth and how it differs from an adult heart. I'll also cover why the fetus needs certain heart structures, its main fetal shunts, blood flow paths, and what will happen to these structures after birth. Why the fetus needs a different circulation system. So, before birth, the fetal lung is full of fluid and doesn't function for gas exchange yet. So, instead, the oxygen and nutrients a fetus needs will come from the placenta. Because of this, the fetal circulatory system has temporary pathways called shunts that will redirect blood away from the lungs and somewhat away from the liver. These structural changes ensure that oxygenated blood from the mother will reach the developing tissues efficiently. Early fetal heart development. So, around day 21 after fertilization, the fetal heart will start beating, and by the fourth week, circulatory patterns will be established. Early development of the heart and blood vessels is important because the embryo grows quickly and will need constant supply of oxygen and nutrients. It also will need a way to remove waste. The circulatory system forms the embryonic mesoderm. Blood islands develop into vascular tubes, and new blood vessels form through a process called angiogenesis, creating a network to support the growing fetus. The placenta and umbilical circulation. The placenta works as the organ for gas and nutrient exchange. So, oxygen rich blood will flow from the placenta through the umbilical vein to the fetus, and deoxygenated blood will return to the placenta through two umbilical arteries. This allows for oxygen and nutrients to be delivered efficiently while waste is also removed. The three fetal shunts. The fetal heart has three major shunts that will reroute blood to bypass or avoid any non-functional organs. The foramen ovale lets blood move from the right atrium into the left atrium, avoiding the lungs. The ductus arteriosus connects the pulmonary trunk to the aorta, which allows the blood to avoid the lungs. And lastly, the ductus venosus connects the umbilical vein to the inferior vena cava, allowing oxygenated blood to bypass the liver. This is really important for working fetal circulation. Foramen ovale and fossa ovalis. So the foramen ovale is a tiny opening in between the wall of the right and left atria. It allows blood to flow directly from the right and left atria, avoiding the lungs. A valve will prevent backflow while the fetus is in the womb. Right after birth, when a newborn takes its very first breaths, the pressure changes in the heart, causing this opening to seal and leaves a small depression called the fossa ovalis. Ductus arteriosus and ligamentum arteriosum. The ductus arteriosus is a small or short vessel that connects the pulmonary trunk to the aorta. Since the fetal lungs are non-functioning, most of the blood from the right ventricle is redirected through this vessel to the aorta. After birth, once the baby breathes, oxygen levels will start to rise, the ductus arteriosus tightens, and it eventually forms the ligamentum arteriosum. Ductus venosus and ligamentum venosum. The ductus venosus allows oxygen-rich blood from the placenta to bypass the liver and flow directly to the inferior vena cava. This ensures that most of the oxygenated blood is able to reach the heart quickly. Once the baby is born and the umbilical cord is clamped, this vessel will gradually close and become the ligamentum venosum. Pathway of blood flow. From the placenta, oxygenated blood travels through the umbilical vein and the ductus venosus to the inferior vena cava, then right into the right atrium. Then right into the right atrium. From the right atrium, the blood will have two main pathways. So some of the blood will flow through the foramen ovale into the left atrium, to the left ventricle, and out of the aorta. The rest of that blood will flow from the right atrium to the right ventricle, into the pulmonary trunk, and through the ductus arteriosus to the aorta. Both of these pathways will deliver blood to developing tissues and the brain. Fetal circulation, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood Oxygenated blood comes from the placenta and it travels through the umbilical vein, ductus venosus, and inferior vena cava. Deoxygenated blood returns to the placenta through the umbilical arteries. Pulmonary arteries only carry a small amount of blood since the lungs are avoided during fetal life. And I think that knowing why vessels are oxygen rich or oxygen poor will help explain how the fetus prioritizes oxygen delivery. Circulatory changes at birth. So at birth, once the newborn takes its very first breaths, the lungs will expand and oxygen levels increase. This signals for the closure of the shunts. Pressure changes in the heart will cause left atrial pressure to rise and right atrial pressure to either drop or decrease. The umbilical cord is clamped to stop blood flow from the placenta. What happens to the fetal shunts after birth? So after birth, the fetal shunts close and form permanent structures in the body. The foramen ovale closes and becomes the fossa ovalis. The ductus arteriosus seals off and turns into the ligamentum arteriosum, while the ductus venosus gradually closes and becomes the ligamentum venosum. The umbilical vein turns into the ligamentum teres, and the umbilical arteries become the medial umbilical ligaments. These changes will allow for the newborn circulation to switch from relying on the placenta to using the lungs and liver for oxygen and nutrient delivery. And this is really important once the baby is born. Here are my references. I used OpenStack, our class textbook, and I also used lecture notes. Thank you.